Every team, every topic, everywhere. This is Believe.
We can get anything delivered from furniture to toilet paper. And now, adult beverages with Drizzly. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly's giving all new customers $5 off their first order. Just enter promo code EASY5 at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt. Als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen.
Hello and welcome to Gegenpressing, the German football podcast from the Football Grad Network. I'm your host, Bryce Dunn. And yes, the Bundesliga has finally returned after the winter break. So let's go over the weekend's results. So starting off on Friday night, we've seen Hoffenheim lose, unfortunately, 3-1 to Bayern. But it meant that Bayern are keeping up with Borussia Dortmund at the top there, only 6 points. Going into Saturday, we've seen Stuttgart 2, Mainz 3, Frankfurt 3, Freiburg 1, Hanover 0, Werder Bremen 1, Augsburg 1, Fortuna Düsseldorf 2, Bayer Leverkusen 0, Borussia Mönchengladbach 1. The late kickoff game, yes, seen Dortmund still 6 points clear, as I just mentioned, as they beat away from home RB Leipzig. Sunday seen Nuremberg 1, Hertha Berlin 3, Schalke 2, and Wolfsburg 1. So, guys, we're back. And when I say guys, I mean Manuel Veth. Let's welcome you on. Have you missed the Bundesliga?
Yeah, indeed I have. And I'm happy it's back, you know. It's just to have that Friday game to kick it off with that, and then lots of action Saturday, Sunday. It's just really nice to have it back. It's been too long.
Oh, yes, it has. And joining Manu and I, as always, is Chris Williams. Chris, how have you been?
I've been very good, Bryce, thank you. Glad the football's back. I mean, Manu and I have chatted outside of this pod about this, but it seems like it's been a massively long winter break, and actually, in reality, it's been shorter than normal. So, glad it's back. And yeah, the football was great over the weekend, and long may that continue until May.
Yes, indeed. It seems like Christmas was ages ago. Never mind the Bundesliga. So, well, we've got someone rather special to join us as we've come back into the football season, and that's Ronan Murphy of Goal.com. Ronan, thank you very much for taking the time out. We know you've got a very demanding time at the moment. Welcome onto the Gegenpressing Podcast.
Thanks very much for having me.
Yeah, so for anyone that may not know who you are, Ronan, or what Goal.com is, I don't know how that's possible if you're into football and you know what the internet is. But explain a little bit about yourself. So you cover the Bundesliga. You're originally from Ireland. How did this all happen?
When I was growing up, we had a certain amount of channels on the television, and one of them was Eurosport, and there was always German football on it. And I suppose I got into it then at a young age, and it probably helped that my father, he used to live in Germany for a couple of years in Heilbronn, so he kind of influenced me. He had a kind of a German influence on me, I suppose, because he speaks German and all that sort of stuff. So he went to the World Cup back in the 70s in Germany, so that kind of gave me an interest in German football, maybe that regular Irish people wouldn't have.
Yeah, I suppose that's very true. And Ronan, was there a side that you particularly enjoyed watching growing up, or is there a team that you support?
There isn't, actually, and I think maybe that gives me a better kind of view of things, the fact that I don't have a particular allegiance to a club. I supported Aston Villa in the Premier League growing up because of all the Irish players that played there, but I kind of grew out of touch. As I got older, I realised, well, I don't really have any connection to this club. It was only because Steve Staunton and Andy Townsend and Ray Houghton and all the lads used to play there. So I don't really support anyone these days apart from the Irish football team, but that kind of has made me go balder a lot quicker than I would have hoped.
Yes, indeed. But, it means that any victory at all for Northern Ireland or the Republic of Ireland, then, we see that as a massive occasion, I suppose. I'm trying to look at the upside. Anyway, we're going to speak about German football rather than Irish football, thankfully. Manu, a man that's been in the press quite a lot. Well, I was going to say this month being January, the January transfer window, but actually he's in every transfer window, is Timo Werner. He's been linked to many clubs, but especially Bayern Munich at the moment. But is there actually anything to this rumour?
To say there isn't anything to that rumour, he's a top striker. I think when you read between the lines of what has been said by anyone but Bayern, who have been very aggressive talking about other transfer targets in this window in particular, I think it's quite clear that there is an interest. Watzke's comments, right? I'm pretty sure Chris will talk about that in a moment. Then of course Rangnick's comments from yesterday, where he said to Sky.de that if Bayern ever gets serious about anything financially, they'll usually get who they want. So yes, there is an interest, but at the same time there is also an unsureness in the Bayern camp on whether they really need him. While on the other hand, they don't want to make the same mistake as they have with Leroy Sané, where they said, okay, well, we don't really need him, and then they let him go, and now they actually realize, okay, well, could have been a transfer that in retrospect we should have probably made. So there is that kind of back and forth. It seems like that. It's almost like that everyone else but Bayern are pushing for this, which of course does not mean that Bayern will not get him in the end, because, if they're usually young German national team player, a striker, Lewandowski's 31, if they are really going to go serious about it, they will get it done. And that's really where Bayern stand on this.
Chris, I want to go to you on this. Obviously, you wrote a fantastic article for the Football Grad Network, and also you, me, Manu, we've spoken many a times about how many times you get asked by Liverpool fans when he's going to arrive at Anfield. What do you feel the lowdown is? Do you think there's any likelihood to him moving in January, the summer, and where could he possibly be going?
Well, thanks very much for saying that. Was an excellent article. It's very nice of you, Bryce. That's online at the moment at footballscout.com, and I took a look at who's really interested in him. Obviously, Bayern are, and they have kept a bit of a distance, as Manu said. But if you think back to last season when Jupp Heynckes was in charge, he did say that Werner's a player they should think about signing, and he went as far as saying they probably should have already done it. But if we're looking at the rest of Europe, obviously Liverpool are heavily linked, and it's been widely reported that Liverpool are interested, and that's by some journalists very, very well connected to the club. David Lynch of the Evening Standard obviously used to work at the Liverpool media team. He's reported that Liverpool are interested, so I think if he's reporting it, you can take it as a given. Also, it's come out in Sport Bild saying that Liverpool are heavily monitoring Werner's situation, and that's obviously key for Liverpool because they should have two strikers leaving this summer, Divock Origi and Daniel Sturridge. They should definitely be going. That will leave a space open for a striker, an out-and-out striker. Liverpool don't have one at the moment. So, I think Liverpool's interest is real. Whether Timo Werner wants to go to the Premier League and play for Liverpool, that's a different thing. Liverpool have been very good over the last couple of transfer windows about getting the targets that they want. They only missed one, which was Nabil Fekir, and all the reports say that Liverpool walked away from that. So they didn't lose that player they went after. And then, of course, Manu mentioned Borussia Dortmund interested, but then, as Watzke said the other day, that he's got the impression that one of the two players that they're keen on has already made his decision, and it's not going to be with Borussia Dortmund. So everybody assumed that was Timo Werner. Now it could also be Thorgan Hazard, but I doubt it. So I would say that maybe Werner and Bayern look like done deal is such a hard word to say, isn't it? But if you look at Goretzka, Pavard, we're not going to Bayern, not really sure. It was done. It was just when it was going to be announced. And then Tottenham Hotspur sending scouts left, right and centre to follow Leipzig. So they're obviously interested. And there's been reports in the Spanish press that Real Madrid are interested. So there's a lot of interested parties out there. But I think that's because he's such a good footballer. But for me, Bryce, if you're going to ask me where do I think he's going to go, I do honestly think it'll be between Bayern Munich and Liverpool.
Ronan, if we just go to you to get your take on it all as well, I mean, where do you see Timo Werner possibly ending up, or do you see him maybe staying on at RB Leipzig? I mean, where's best for maybe him as well?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Chris there that perhaps Bayern Munich probably are the best choice for him, and maybe he might get the best opportunity there. I know people have been saying, and anytime I've mentioned it on Twitter, people have replied and said, well, they have Robert Lewandowski. How is he going to get a game? But if you look, Lewandowski is going to be 31 at the start of next season, so it's not like he's going to be around at Bayern forever. And even if he doesn't leave like all the previous summers with the rumours to Real Madrid and all that, even if he stays on for a few years, you'd imagine Bayern have to be looking at maybe some sort of succession plan for Lewandowski, because they don't want him to turn around in a year or two and say he's retiring and this is the end of me. Maybe I'm going off to get some money in China or money in America or something, and then they don't have anyone in place. Whereas if they signed Timo Werner, he would be the perfect player for them. But the only thing is maybe he won't score against Borussia Dortmund because he still hasn't done it for Leipzig. So maybe that might be the one flaw in that plan.
Yes, indeed. Do you think that, I mean, there's some articles saying at the moment, Ronan, that, RB Leipzig are putting a bit of pressure on Timo Werner to sign a contract. Is that because they're a little bit concerned that, they basically want to get their as much money as they possibly can out of such a deal?
Yeah, exactly. I think Ralf Rangnick and some of the staff there at RB Leipzig have said that they don't really want him to go into the last year of his contract, a bit like Thorgan Hazard probably at Borussia Mönchengladbach. They don't want to have him in the last year and maybe lose him for free in the summer of 2020. And if you're looking at maybe getting 40 million plus for him this summer, you kind of have to take that and not have him for the year and hope you can find a player in this summer rather than waiting until next summer and having no money to play with.
Yeah, well, that's exactly it. I mean, Chris, what type of figures are knocking around with Timo Werner at the moment?
Oh, well, it's a buyer's market, I suppose, isn't it, at the moment? I mean, quite similar thought process to Ronan there. Once he goes into the last year of his contract, I don't think we're going to see some sort of silly money. If he was to go, or let's say he was to sign a contract extension with Leipzig and say, okay, I'll stay for another year, then I think we could expect some serious bids for him. But I wouldn't be surprised to see him go for anything maybe less than what Christian Pulisic went for. So maybe around about 60 million euros. He's an exceptional player, but Leipzig, if they get to the summer and it's not been sorted, they've already let everybody know that they won't let him enter that final year. So all of a sudden, anybody who wants to buy him will be able to say, well, we'll just wait to get him for free. So I think it is a little bit of a buyer's market here. And when I was writing that article, the contacts we've got on the Football Grad Network do realise that Timo Werner would be happy to stay because he is quite keen and interested to work with Julian Nagelsmann. But if there's no Europa League or Champions League football, people close to the player have said he won't stay because he wants to play. He got a taste of it. In the picture he used in the articles, him scoring against Monaco. So he's used to scoring in the Champions League, used to playing in the Europa League, and maybe that's the only thing that might stop him not staying at Leipzig is a lack of European football. But he's very keen, and he wants to get on and he wants to play at the highest level. So I can see him moving, because whilst Leipzig are a great club, they're still not in that bracket that Borussia Dortmund and certainly Bayern Munich are in. And then if he wants to elevate his brand and his image rights, then a move to the Premier League would obviously do that.
Yes, indeed. Well, as a Liverpool fan, I suppose I would have to admit I'd be rather excited if he turned up for us next season. But let's just see what happens with this. It could be a bit of a long, drawn-out one, I feel. We're going to go back to you, Ronan, on some other big news that happened, but to come out of the Premier League, and that was that David Wagner left Huddersfield Town. Unfortunately, this season things haven't really gone to plan for them. They are rooted to the bottom of the table. Personally, I think he's done a fantastic job there to get a side that were so lowly in the Championship, then promoted through the playoffs, and then to keep them in the Premier League. Does this mean that, with him leaving Huddersfield, that there's going to be Bundesliga teams in the future, when they need new coaches, are going to be knocking on his door?
You would imagine so. If he makes himself available for those sort of jobs, then I definitely think that he can walk into maybe a top half team in the Bundesliga and maybe manage a team that have European ambitions, or a team that are already in Europe. I don't see why not, because I think Jurgen Klopp came out after Wagner stepped down and said that it's only once he's gone the Huddersfield Town fans and the football fans in general will see how good a job he really did at Huddersfield. And I think maybe that's what will happen now under the next manager. It's going to be a difficult job because Huddersfield don't have a brilliant squad, but Wagner did excellently while he was there. Yeah,
you get the impression that he kind of hit their ceiling, didn't he? With little cash and maybe not the strongest of squads, Ronan. Just to maybe look at the Bundesliga sides that we've got, is there any teams in particular, whether they need a coach or not, that you kind of think would be the right place for David Wagner?
I suppose if you're looking at teams maybe where managers are under pressure at the moment, you could look at Schalke. If Tedesco can turn things around, maybe he doesn't have that long left, and if there is a job like that comes up, you would think that his name will definitely be one of the rumoured names to take over. So I think somewhere like that might work for him. I know it's a different tactical style, because it's a different approach than maybe he would have done at Huddersfield, and they would perhaps be more attacking, but I would have no doubts about his ability to take on that role and maybe actually get some of their strikers scoring some goals.
Yes, indeed, it would be quite the change from the Tedesco times. Manu, just to bring you into this as well, is there any sides in the Bundesliga you think you might be a right fit for David Wagner and his style of football?
Chris is probably going to throw up his arms on this one, but I think Stuttgart, I think, the way they've been playing under Weinziel, that coaching change has done almost nothing for them. And Schalke has shown some signs for me that they might be able to turn things around. A big result for them, and we'll get to talk about that in a little bit on the weekend, right? But for me, maybe they can turn things around a little bit. And the big link between Schalke and Wagner is, of course, Christian Heidel, the sporting director. Now, there's talks that if Schalke do not turn around, it wouldn't be just Tedesco that would leave, it would also be Heidel. So I don't know where that would leave any kind of future for David Wagner, right? If one Mainz connection is gone, will it be still possible to get him in? That remains to be seen. So I think Stuttgart could be a good bet, because they are a big club that just cannot find that fit in management, that person that can just steer them clear. And maybe David Wagner can do this. He worked under very difficult circumstances in Huddersfield, and I think the way he managed the situation there, the way he got them to the Premier League, I think that could maybe work in Stuttgart as well.
Chris, if we speak to you a little bit about this as well, what about the likes of a side like Hoffenheim? Would that be too small fry for Wagner, or would that be a good fit?
Well, I wouldn't say Hoffenheim are small fry. I think they're a very good side, top six side. Julian Nagelsmann's made them into a top six side now. I think Hoffenheim would be a great fit for him.
More meaning if maybe he's got his eyes set quite high at the moment.
I think Hoffenheim would be a good fit for him. It's whether Marco Rose has already agreed to go in there. That's the story that we're hearing, is that he's pretty much nailed on to go in there. Now, whether that's true or not, I think he would do well maybe at one of the clubs that comes up, either Hamburg or Cologne. They look like they're going to get promoted. And whilst Hamburg have got Hannes Wolf, they have got a tendency to chop and change their manager sometimes with surprise. So he could do that, or maybe he could go and even take a Bundesliga 2 side like Ingolstadt and take them up again. But Yeah, I mean, I couldn't see him walking into a top three side, but I could see, like Ronan said, a top half team in the Bundesliga, and I think he'd do very, very well because he plays a similar style of football than what we see throughout the Bundesliga: high press, fast football, quick transition. I think he'd fit a number of sides. And yeah, obviously he left Huddersfield by mutual consent, and Huddersfield came out and said. And there's a very, very good statement that says this is actually mutual consent. It's not, when you read that, Mourinho left United by mutual consent. It's a sacking. But this didn't happen with David Wagner. He needed a break. And as we've seen before, maybe 6-month break for him. And I wouldn't be surprised to see him back in management next season. And you're quite right when you said the Huddersfield glass ceiling. I spoke to him, I think it was around about this time last year. I think it was a Manchester City, so that would have been the Champions League quarter-final at Anfield. I was lucky enough to be sat next to him. He was on the desk next to me in the press box, and I had a good chat with him and said, are we going to see in the Bundesliga next year? And his answer was, well, no, I've got a job to do at Huddersfield. I'm fully committed to that. That's all I'm looking at. I personally would have thought he would have moved on in the summer because getting them promoted and keeping him there, that for me was their ceiling. But obviously, he's gone into this campaign and left halfway through. But I can definitely see him coming back into the Bundesliga in the summer.
And just before we go to Ronan about the title race, we want to speak to him a little bit before he has to go. Chris, what do we know about the man replacing him at Huddersfield, Jan Siebert, coming from Borussia Dortmund, their coaching facility? I mean, they just seem to churn out coaches, that go into management these days, don't they?
Yeah, now whether David Wagner has said, look, you might want to look at Jan as a potential replacement, but Ronan did. Ronan made a very good comment on Twitter earlier. Are they just looking for the next David Wagner? He's not done particularly well at Borussia Dortmund too. He's not got a reputation of bringing talent through and develop them in the same sort of way that Wagner did. So, I mean, I would go to you, Ronan, and say, I mean, I'm of the opinion they're just trying to find David Wagner Mark II on this, and maybe it's going to be the wrong appointment for him.
Yeah, I think possibly that could be it. Perhaps it's not the right fit for a coach, a young coach like Sievert, where has respect in certain German circles for helping develop young players, but he hasn't really done that in the 2 years he's been in with Borussia Dortmund. The players that have come through to the senior team are players that probably would have came through anyway. You can't really say that he was responsible for Jadon Sancho or anything like that. He played 2 or 3 games for him and then was moved on, but he was always going to kind of catapult into the first team after arriving from Man City. So yeah, I'm not sure it's the right kind of appointment for Huddersfield because they need maybe a win now manager or someone that is more pragmatic and has an approach of we'll pick up every point we have, whereas I don't think a medium plan manager is the answer for them, and that's what they've said in their statements, that they're looking at years down the line, that this isn't just a stopgap appointment, but perhaps when you're trying to establish yourself as a regular Premier League team year on year, you might need that kind of manager to begin with, and then you can begin to look further down the field. So I'm not sure. I know I've annoyed some Borussia Dortmund people on Twitter by saying he isn't the right choice for it, or perhaps he doesn't have the experience for it, but I think only time will tell. But it doesn't look positive at the moment for the long term anyway.
Yeah, you do have to say, don't you, that possibly bringing in one of these old English managers that continually seem to get jobs, maybe we're not saying that, but to take a gamble on another coach like this and giving him a job, it is a gamble, isn't it? It's a bit of a tricky one. Hopefully it pays off for Huddersfield and Sievert, but let's keep a little eye on that one, see how it goes the rest of the season. Ronan, we know that you haven't got much time, so we just want to speak to you a little bit about the title race. I mean, it seems like everyone that we have on the podcast is excited this season. They're enjoying that Dortmund are top, that Bayern are trailing. Do you see Dortmund being able to hold on and win the title this year?
I was on American radio at the start of the season, and I kind of said I'd eat my hat if Bayern Munich didn't win the title. And then you
should stream that. I hope you do stream it. If you
as the Hinrunde went on, I started wondering what kind of condiments I could use to put together with my hat. But I think I'm going to still stick to my guns. I think Bayern have been playing well to end the year. They played very well, and they played well on Friday night. Although it was perhaps a game of two halves, and I know you'll describe it later, but I think the fact that they held on and they got the kind of late goal to really secure the win, it shows the confidence maybe that the players now have in Niko Kovac that wasn't there before. And I think Borussia Dortmund, if they have a few more injuries, they have a few at the moment, but if they have injuries to key players, I think they could kind of suffer. They don't have maybe the same depth that Bayern do. So I'd still back Bayern at this stage, even though there is that gap there at the moment. I think it'll be go down to the wire, and it'll be the most entertaining title race in years, but I'm still backing Bayern for the title.
Yeah, we're certainly enjoying it, aren't we? It's refreshing, if anything, but they're definitely keeping the pressure on after that blip earlier in the season. Ronan, we know that you haven't got much time. Is there anything that you would like to promote, or where can people find your stuff online? I know goal.com, but what's maybe like your Twitter handle there?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is @SwearNotPaul, which actually comes from a music blog I used to run back in the day. And if you want a longer explanation of why that's the name, I can give it to you on Twitter, but it'd probably be too long to go into it, and maybe too boring for some of the listeners to go into at the moment. But that's where you can find me, and I usually post some transfer rumours and stuff like that, as well as links to whatever Bundesliga article I've written at the moment. My latest one was on how Callum Hudson-Odoi will fit in at Bayern Munich. So that has wound up some Chelsea fans. So that's always good.
I think in the world of Twitter, as everyone knows, it's very easy to wind up, especially football fans. But Ronan, we really appreciate you coming on. If you're not following him, start to follow him. And also, I'm really quite intrigued by that Twitter handle. I'll probably tweet later. But anyway, Ronan, we'll let you go. And thank you very much for coming on. And we'll hopefully have you on again in the near future.
Thanks very much, fellas.
Cheers, Ronan. Thanks a lot.
Cheers, Ronan. Thanks.
So, guys, I suppose we better get to it and talk about the games at the weekend. We did mention while Ronan was on there that Bayern Munich are keeping up. They may still be 6 points behind, but they're keeping the pressure on Borussia Dortmund. And it was the Friday night game, the first game back, the second half of the season, as they managed to, blow away Hoffenheim, especially in that first half with a final score of 3-1. Manu, this was quite the statement, wasn't it? It would have been easy to drop a few points against Hoffenheim, and Nagelsmann is always a tricky coach to come up against.
Yeah, he is, especially for Bayern. Julian Nagelsmann, going into this game, has not lost a home game against Bayern. In fact, he's won the last two. So this was a challenge, and like the opening of the season, another game that Bayern won, I thought that Hoffenheim actually really did challenge Bayern, especially in the second 45 minutes. I know Chris and I, we were joking offline saying, well, this could end 4-0, and then Hoffenheim got a goal back, and I felt for the last 20 minutes or so, this game could have gone either way. I mean, and in some ways, Bayern could have dropped still 2 points, even though they were up 2-0, and they had a few wobbles like this already this season where they were up by 2 goals and still dropped points. It's something that we not seen from them in the 6 years prior, right? So for them to get that done, to get that job done, to score that, and you know it's not technically not the game winner, but Lewandowski put the game to bed, didn't he, when he scored the third? I think that was quite important, and it really put the pressure up on Borussia Dortmund. So that basically what I took away from this game is Bayern had a big ask. The first 45 minutes they were immensely impressive, very good football, probably the best half under Niko Kovac. The second half, you saw all the weaknesses of that side. Whenever Hoffenheim stretched them and played the ball quickly forward, you almost had the feeling that they were really vulnerable. And I think that is something, I mean, Chris, that's something that we discussed quite a bit, right? So I'm curious to hear your takes on all of this, but that's something that I really took away from this match.
Yeah, the first 45 minutes, Bayern were exceptional, very, very fast, very, very well played. I did think it was, like you said, one of the best performances that they put on this season. I thought Kimmich was exceptional. Alaba was brilliant. Kingsley Coman was a revelation. I did think that first half they were exceptional. If we're going to be really, really finicky and going to pull out a disappointment, I thought they should have probably gone in maybe 2, 3, maybe even 4 goals up. That's how good they were. And on the second half, I do think they looked very susceptible. They were susceptible to a fast break. They were susceptible to balls that were very quickly switched. So if you're breaking down the right, it switched over to the left very quickly. And I think that's because they didn't really have the speed in the midfield area to deal with that. And whilst I like Leon Goretzka a lot, I do think he negates his defensive duties a bit. But how they were good the first half, and they weren't so good the second half. But for me, and I put this in my thoughts on Football Stat, I do seriously think that is a Julian Nagelsmann problem, and we've seen this before. I've seen it firsthand in the flesh, and I spoke to him about it afterwards. And if we think all the way back to the Champions League playoff qualifier against Liverpool, he went with the wrong formation, and they were crucified by Liverpool inside of 10 minutes. Once he made the substitution, and I think correctly that night, that I think he brought on, I think it was Kramaric, and that changed the game. For me, Nagelsmann is a really good coach, but so often he sets up the wrong side. And Manu, we saw this in the Champions League this season. He sets up a side and they go 1 or 2 down, and he's got to rectify it. Now, he is very good at rectifying it. But as I put in my thoughts, when does the ability to rectify something and make you a good tactical genius, when does that actually become poor foresight? And has Julian Nagelsmann not really learnt his lesson? Because yes, he nearly rescued the game there, and Hoffenheim should have been drawing at some point. They should have drew that game with the chances they had in the second half and the openings they created for themselves. But when does this poor foresight become a problem? Because for me, if he goes to Leipzig and starts to do this, I think Ralf Rangnick will want to have a chat with him quite quickly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. I mean, this is how they threw away the Champions League group. And I mean that quite harshly. That's how they did it, Rick, because it happened against Shakhtar, and it happened against Olympique Marseille, Olympique Lyon twice, right? Even against Man City, he almost seems reactionary. And I think going into this game, we all know what Bayern's weaknesses are, right? And when you compare Nagelsmann, the way he coached the game against Bayern and the way Lucien Favre coached the Bayern, Dortmund kept the first half really tight. They said, okay, like even if we're down a goal, that's fine. We're gonna keep the score tight because we know that this Bayern side will run out of steam around the 50, 60 minute mark, which is exactly what happened in this game as well, right? So I think he almost tinkers too much, right? He almost overthinks it. And then when he sees the game take place in front of his eyes, he's like, okay, well, this is what I actually should be doing, even though the evidence going from prior matches has already been there for him. So I think maybe that's something that he has to look at when he develops as a coach, because we have to remember he's only 31. He's younger than anyone on this podcast. So in that regard, maybe this is a learning process, and maybe that is where someone like Ralf Rangnick, although he's a tinkerer himself, so I'm curious to see how this is all going to play out. I think we're going to have many podcasts discussing the relationship between Nagelsmann and Rangnick next year. But I think that maybe with his experience, he can just sort of say, don't second guess yourself. Because for me, this screams second guessing. If he comes up with a tactic in the second half that works, he probably already had that tactic in his sleeve. He just didn't go with it. So I think that Hoffenheim in some ways potentially dropped points here because their tactical approach in the first half didn't work. And maybe a more defensive approach in the first half, because they were stretched really badly. I mean, Chris, you're right. That should have been 4 goals in the first half alone for Bayern. And in the second half, they were compact. They were really quick in the transition game. They were excellent whenever they did win the ball on their own third to quickly break forward and use the lack of pace that someone like Hummels has, for example, or the fact that Goretzka was playing almost as a number 10 and that space in midfield. Thiago, for example, when he was taking off, I messaged you and said, well, I didn't realize he was even on, right? So they didn't even use that space in midfield. And I think if you're a Hoffenheim fan, I would find that all a little bit disappointing.
We can get anything delivered from furniture to toilet paper. And now, adult beverages with Drizzly. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly's giving all new customers $5 off their first order. Just enter promo code EASY5 at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.
Well, that's it. That was Julian Nagelsmann, 31, and that was his 100th game in charge. So he's still got plenty to learn, especially at that young age. If we go back to Bayern, though, Chris, they're trying their best, aren't they, to make up that ground on Borussia Dortmund. They obviously need Borussia Dortmund to drop some points, being 6 points behind them, but 6 games, 1 in a row. They haven't lost I think now in 7 or 8 maybe. They really are doing all they can, aren't they? And do you think Borussia Dortmund will possibly feel that pressure?
Yeah, I do, because you look at Bayern now and you look at them 3 months ago and they are a completely different side. Not only are they playing together as a unit, Kovac looks happy. If you look at the senior players, they look happy. Hummels, he's not made any strange press statements lately, so that's good. Muller looks very happy. Lewandowski up front looks very happy. All the main players that they've got seem to be very, very happy. I know some of the older guys like Frank Ribery had a little bit of a fine because of some of the stuff he got up to in the winter break, but you can only assume that he's a happy guy himself. But that's what it looks like at the moment. Bayern look a completely different animal off the pitch, which is allowing them to play a lot better on the pitch. Now, you're always going to get a transitional period with a new manager. It's just unfortunate for Niko Kovac that he went to the biggest side in Germany, one of European elite sides. So he had to do his development in a very public arena. And had he been somewhere else, let's say he moved from Frankfurt, but if he'd moved to a club of a similar stature as Frankfurt, he would have done that development out more of the public eye, and he would have been able to get on with it. Now I think Kovac knows what his best side is. I don't think he knew that 3 months ago. I think he knows his best tactics. I don't think he knew that 3 months ago, and this is why we're seeing Bayern play so well. And yeah, I think now we'll have a real title fight. And if Dortmund do slip up, and we saw them slip up against Dusseldorf, they came straight back out and beat Borussia Mönchengladbach. Now, if they step up in the next couple of weeks, what's their answer going to be? Because they've got a different Bayern animal behind them now. And whilst I would like to see Dortmund win the league, because of my own loyalties in inverted commas there, it wouldn't surprise me now to see Bayern really start to attack and come back, because they look like the Bayern Munich that I've certainly known and have watched. Maybe not as good as they were under Pep Guardiola, but they're certainly the best that they've been in a while. I think this team now is playing better than it did under Carlo Ancelotti. It's probably playing similar under the way they did under Jupp Heynckes, and for Niko Kovac to get that sort of performance level out of the team, then that's only good for Bayern. And yeah, I do think we have a real title fight on our hands now, Bryce.
Yes, it's the exciting, close title fight though that we may have hoped for the last few seasons. And Manu, I suppose I want to hear your opinion on that as well. Like, do you think that Dortmund are not just feeling the pressure, but do you think they'll be able to withstand this kind of pressure throughout the rest of the season? And then if we look at the games moving forwards, Dortmund have Frankfurt in not the next game, but the following one. And that's where it gets difficult for them. But then Bayern Munich have Leverkusen, who are no walkovers either. So an easier game followed by a tough one. And it might be just when they come up against teams like that who can actually withstand playing the bigger, tougher opponents and gets through that, is it not?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that already this weekend, both teams had very strong opposition. Typical kind of stumbling blocks in Hoffenheim and in Leipzig, and Dortmund's answer, I think, was a good one against Leipzig because they were playing, they had some severe problems, and as Ronan was alluding to earlier in this podcast, with injuries, right? Marco Reus missing out this game, and it's always a big worry when Marco Reus is not in the side. He is, in my opinion, a world-class player when fit. And he is a player with the biggest impact of any players in the Bundesliga. And the impact that he has on this Dortmund side is huge. It cannot be underestimated by any means. And then the fact that they had to put Weigl into center back, and I thought Weigl was really, really good in this game. He's growing into this role as playing as a center back. He was really excellent against Gladbach as well before the winter break. And then the fact that other players, Witzel, I mean, the way he hammered home that ball to ultimately win the game for Dortmund, and the fact that in the last 10, 15 minutes that Leipzig had chances, Ronan Murphy really stood up and really became a big factor in this game. And I think all of these things combined, they went into this game understaffed, without their biggest star, against a team in Leipzig that has never lost at the start of the Rückrunde. And they got this 3 points. I mean, going by the fact that Bayern put a lot of pressure on them and all these other factors mentioned, that's a big response. That's a statement of intent. And I think they have to really follow up that statement of intent, because next weekend they're playing Hannover, a team that's really, really struggling at the bottom of the table, a must 3-pointer. The last time they had a must 3-pointer was against Düsseldorf. They stumbled there. So I really hope that they're going to be able to get those 3 points. And then Bayern, of course, have Stuttgart on Sunday. The way Stuttgart have been playing, it's another must win. So it's going to be interesting because it's kind of like a tit for tat right now, isn't it?
Yeah, very much so. It leaves it entertaining, you know. I feel that, Chris, we need to go back to you and speak a little bit about Borussia Dortmund and that, that reply really with Axel Witsel scoring early on against RB Leipzig in the late kickoff on Saturday. It's exactly the type of result that Favre would have wanted, with Bayern Munich keeping the pressure on them. Funnily enough, the first time that RB Leipzig in the Bundesliga have ever lost the first game of the second half of the season. But I mean, they were in it, they were pushing and they were trying, they just weren't very clinical. So as Manu said, another great result.
Yeah, it was. And I spoke with Derek Ray on Twitter after this, because he did the commentary for it for the World Feed. This was one of the best 1-0 games I've seen in a long time. If you just would have flicked onto the internet, or I nearly said teletext, and Bryce showed me age. If you'd have flicked onto the internet and just seen, Dortmund beat Leipzig 1-0 and the goal was scored in the 19th minute, you'd think that maybe it was a bit of a dull game. It wasn't. It was completely the opposite. On another night, this could be... Well, it could have been 3-3, could have been 4-4. Paco Alcácer was denied a goal by 3-4 centimeters. You look at the goal detection system, goal line detection system, that it was half the ball was over the line already. So he was millimeters away or centimeters away from adding a goal. Manu's quite right to highlight Julian Weigl. I missed him out in my 3 thoughts, and realistically or reflectively, that was a bad thing to do, because playing at centre back, he was excellent. He had a bad game against Bayern, and he's really come back from that now. But yeah, if we're going to talk about winning the league, sometimes you need a little bit of luck. And I'm not going to say it was a lucky win by Dortmund, because the goal they scored was exceptional, and they did play very, very well. They created chances of their own, but Roman Murphy was exceptional, like Manu said. There was 12 chances in total, 5 were denied by Roman Murphy. Leipzig then, fluffed the other 7. 2 of them were blocked, 5 were pulled high or wide. Sabitzer really should have nailed that one-on-one, and he didn't. It was a good save by Murphy, but if you've got a goalkeeper advancing at you and you've got enough time to pick your spot, I mean, if that would have been Alcácer or even Werner in that case, I think Werner bends the ball around Berkey and it hits the back of the net. So I think you do need a little bit of luck. And there was a challenge from Berkey on Werner that looked like a foul to me in real time, and it certainly looked like a foul in slow time. I'm surprised VAR didn't get it, because if we're going to go for clear and obvious errors, that looked a pretty clear and obvious error for me. So Dortmund did win, and they deserved the win, but they had just a little bit of luck. And if we're going to talk about winning a title, you need a little bit of luck.
Yes, you do. That's a well-known fact and well put, Chris. Manu, do we know when Marco Reus is possibly going to be back with the sides? And I suppose then, if we're talking about players that were on the field, I mean, Witsel and Berkey were, as Chris was pointing towards, were very impressive once again by Witsel, actually.
Yeah, so two statements on Reus. Michael Zorc, the sporting director of Borussia Dortmund, said he'd be back likely against Hannover and definitely against Frankfurt. So maybe a week, maybe two. And Marco Reus said today he'll be back against Hannover. So I could see them maybe resting him against Hannover to give him that extra week, because again, I mean, they won this week. They did quite well. And Hannover is not going to be quite as challenging as Leipzig. On the other hand, do you want to do a Düsseldorf, right? And drop 3 points against a team that you definitely need to beat. So, but yeah, the word is a week, most two, which is good news for Borussia Dortmund.
Yes, indeed. Definitely good news for them. I suppose let's look further down the table and some of the other teams that played. Well, Manu, how about we? I know that there's plenty of teams to talk about in between, but I feel we need to talk a little bit about your favourite side in Augsburg. Another loss. Things aren't looking very good down in 15th for them. Is it?
Yeah, we don't often talk about Augsburg, do we?
You're not a big fan of doing so.
No, that's not the reason. No, I mean,
last year I thought they did pretty well, and I wanted to do a special on them, but I was shot down.
I don't remember any of this.
No, funny that. Well, come on, let's talk a little bit about Augsburg. I mean, there are teams that are obviously struggling quite a bit down the opposite end of the table, and they're definitely one of them. They would have been expected to do a bit better this season, but they're 15 points, 15 positions. You know, it's not looking good for them. They're really in the thick of it.
Yeah, although, you know, it is funny, and before you accuse me of bias, Augsburg is one of those sides that you're always going to expect to be down there. They just happen to be very good at overperforming, and that is because they did a very good job there over many, many years, right? At some point, though, finances do catch up with you, and you're going to struggle. And I think this is going to be a year where they're going to be in that relegation dogfight to the very end. And I mean, there's good reasons for that. First of all, you have sides like Freiburg. Freiburg, once again, you know, they are able to just pull themselves out a little bit out of that bottom half, just because they are able to get points against some of the bigger teams. Augsburg have not been able to do that this year. Then you have the fact, and this is a team that we should be talking about, Fortuna Düsseldorf, right? That have done very well, much better than many expected. They are on 21 points now. They are 7 points away from that promotion relegation playoff spot. I don't think anyone expected that at this stage. I certainly didn't expect that, because I saw Düsseldorf live in Nuremberg in October, and Nuremberg won that game 3-0, and I would have thought that maybe Nuremberg would be that side that would be out of that relegation dogfight rather than Düsseldorf. But Düsseldorf have really pulled it together. They collected 4 points against Bayern and Dortmund. That's not a small feat. So that's one of the reasons why, you know, if there's certain teams that you expect down there to overperform, then someone else has to be down there that you don't necessarily expect. I mean, one of those sides is certainly Stuttgart. And another one is Augsburg. Augsburg, if things don't go right for them, then they will be one of those teams fighting relegation for the entire season. So I think this year it's just one of those factors. And then of course they lost some key players. Marvin Hitz playing now, being the second keeper at Dortmund rather than being the number one in Augsburg. That's a big factor, for example.
Chris, I mean, if we go to you and speak to someone that's, I don't know whether you like Augsburg any more than Manu does, but I would imagine most people probably do, even if they don't support them. I mean, do you see them possibly going down this year? I mean, it is a tricky one for them, but have they not got enough about them to stay up?
Oh, I think it's going to be, someone's going to be hard pressed to take over from Nuremberg and Hanover. I think pretty much like last season with Hamburg and Cologne, those two sides have done that badly that we can probably see that those are going to be the sides. So 18th and 17th now, Hanover and Nuremberg, 17th and 18th, Hanover and Nuremberg. I think they will probably fight it out between themselves to see who finishes bottom. I can't really see them making up the gap. I know it's only 3 points, but when you can't buy a win for love nor money, and that 3 points might well be 10. So it's going to come down from Stuttgart or Augsburg, who's going to go into that dreaded playoff place. The gap to Fortuna now, and Fortuna are being excellent. And I think that coincides with the arrival of their new sporting director, who we all know very well. And I think he's been exceptional. Maybe just his presence around a ground has helped Fortuna Düsseldorf. So I'm maybe thinking come this May, it's going to be Stuttgart where we're going. I mean, Augsburg, hot and cold, week in, week out. And as Manu's already said, they are, if we're going to look at the Bundesliga and Bundesliga 2 as two pretty much decent leagues, and we've said before in this podcast that, they are the top 36 teams in Germany, and there's probably 20 teams, maybe even 25 teams who could all compete in the top league. And I think Augsburg are one of those teams that can transition between the two quite easily. If they go down, do they come back up? That's probably a question for another podcast. But at the moment, the way Stuttgart are playing, I think Augsburg might just miss out on that 16th place, but it's going to be very, very close. I do think it's between 15th and 16th now. Augsburg and Stuttgart are just going to be playing the rest of that season to see who goes into relegation 2019 playoff.
Yeah, but you do feel sort of with Stuttgart, with all the money and the finances that they have, that sooner or later they will have to kick it on. I mean, the talent level is there. And you look at that squad, and the kind of signings that they're making, that they are the more likely to sort this out, right?
I mean, yeah, I'd agree with that. But I mean, if we just look back to last season, really, both Hamburg and Cologne shouldn't have gone down because of the talent they had in, and unfortunately for them, they still did. But I mean, we could be everything can change inside of 2 match days between 15th and 16th. There could be a bigger gap than 1 point, and we might find that in 2 or 3 games time, Stuttgart have pulled away and maybe have got themselves a little bit of a cushion. But I think the rest of the season is going to be fighting it out. This might be a last day job. Who's going to get into that 16th place come the very last match day?
That game against Bayern for Stuttgart, I feel like if they get trashed 5-6-0, that could really define the rest of the season for them.
Oh yeah, I mean, we've seen it before, haven't we? Teams that aren't playing particularly well, all of a sudden, they ship 5-6 goals, and that just dips your confidence, and it also gives your rivals a little bit of a buoy up, a little bit of a G up. It's like, oh yes, they've just been smashed, and they've just been smashed 5-0. Let's go out now, and even if they get a point in the next game and a point in the game after that, that's still a point more. And I think we are going to get down to fine margins. So if Augsburg can just nick a point off Stuttgart, or if Stuttgart can just nick a point off Augsburg, when they're playing, if they can better their result by 1 point every time, I think we could end up seeing a bit of a gap emerging. But I mean, those bottom 4, it's 3 out of those 4 for me.
Yeah, I would go along with that.
Manu, to speak about the teams down in the positions down there, is there any talk of any managerial changes or head coaching changes, especially with the likes of, for example, David Wagner maybe floating around and being available now? Yes, he said he needs some time off, but if the right project was to come his way, maybe he'd be swayed.
Yeah, the only one I could see would be Stuttgart, Bryce. Hannover kicker leaned themselves very far out of the window in saying that Breitenreiter would get fired. Ultimately, Kirch, the president, said today that is not the case. He will be in charge against Borussia Dortmund. So no new manager bounce for Hannover against Borussia Dortmund. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative. I guess we'll find out. But for me, just like Stuttgart are having almost a mission impossible at the Allianz, Hannover have a mission impossible at the Signal Iduna Park next weekend, and I could see that game, especially if Reus comes back, to be talking about a 5-0 or 6-0. Can't see Breitenreiter to stay, but I can't see Wagner taking that job. They don't have any money. There's no resources. Their striker solution was to reactivate a Brazilian named Jonathan, who they sent out on loan to Corinthians, and Corinthians were the ones that ended the loan agreement early because he only scored 1 goal in 9 games over in Brazil. That's the kind of situation you would walk into. I can't see it. I can't see David Wagner to go in. Kickers said Mirko Slomka, Gistol are the candidates. That seems more fitting to the situation, I guess. But yeah, I would keep an eye on Hannover, and Stuttgart is always good for a coaching change. They do 1 at least a season, sometimes 2. So keep an eye on that.
I think what we need to maybe bear in mind with David Wagner is he has left by mutual consent, and he's walked out because he wants a break. So it wouldn't surprise me as part of his severance package, as in, yes, okay, you can go because you need a break and thanks for everything you've done, is if there's some sort of clause in there with Huddersfield to say that he can't go into a job before next season, because it would be very odd for a manager to say, look, I need a break, and 3-4 weeks later, take a new managerial job again. And let's not forget that he's got out of a contract with Huddersfield, and I do believe that Huddersfield will have put something in to his severance package to say, okay, happy, if you want to walk away and you need a break, that's great, but when you sign here, you're not allowed to manage another club for 6 months.
Yeah, and it's not exactly a break, a take over a team like Hannover. He left because he felt the pressure of a relegation battle. So why would he then take on a mission impossible like Hannover? I just can't see it.
Well, what did seem like a mission impossible, Chris, was Fortuna Düsseldorf. We didn't expect them to maybe go on the winning spree that they have. That's 4 games they've won in a row, 21 points. They've really pulled things around. Before those 12 points, in those last 4 games, that wasn't them on 9. So, do you see them continuing on this upward trajectory and being safe? We kind of mentioned that 4 teams at the bottom are going to battle it out, but would you say that Fortuna are probably good enough to stay away from it?
Well, they've got a big test next, haven't they? They're playing Leipzig, although they're playing Leipzig at home. And then Fortuna have got to go away to Hoffenheim. So there's 2 very hard back-to-back fixtures, and then they've got themselves maybe a little easier fixture against Stuttgart at home, and then they've got to go to Bayer Leverkusen. So the next 4 games, maybe it's going to be a bit of a hard ask for them to pick up. I'm saying maybe more than 4 points is going to be really hard ask for them. I genuinely can see Leipzig bouncing back straight away, and then Hoffenheim were very unlucky against Bayern, and they're playing Hoffenheim at home in the new Pro Zero stadium, renamed stadium. So out of the next 4 games, I'm going to put my neck on the line here and say they're only going to get 4 points. So 4 points out of 4 games, that cushion could soon disappear.
Yeah, exactly. There's that 6 points, but that can change and rather quickly in football. But Manu, big wins for the likes of Mainz and Schalke as well over the weekend. Obviously, things haven't went to plan for Schalke either, but they're looking a little bit more comfortable now. I think they've steadied the ship somewhat.
Yeah, they had to. I thought it was interesting that Tedesco decided to bench Fährmann and play Nübel instead. Nübel is a very, very talented coach and a goalkeeper, and it worked for them. They got the 3 points against Wolfsburg, against an excellent Wolfsburg side this year. And there have been some talks that Christian Heidel, the sporting director, is under fire, that he could be seen the door together with Tedesco if things don't turn around quickly. So that's a massive 3 points for them. And Mainz, I mean, they were excellent in that first half. I think we talk about so many different clubs all the time, bigger clubs as well. But they've really gone out and brought in a bunch of young players, went out to revitalize this football club, play a different kind of football, the sort of Karnevalsverein football that they've been known for so many years. And I think that's really paying off for them. And I think it's actually fun again to watch Mainz. So good for them. 24 points now. They're looking good. 40 points is enough when you stay in the league. They're not far away from that. They're essentially just 5 wins away from security, to safety, which is always the number one thing that you want to do as a club like Mainz, right? So, and they're doing it by playing good football. So I think that's a really fantastic thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Things are looking somewhat more positive for them. I suppose in the next few weeks we'll see who really is in trouble down there, and I suppose the title race will just see whether Borussia Dortmund do have the have the steel to go all the way. But that more or less does it for today. We've appreciated everyone tuning in to listen, and we've appreciated having Ronan on. But guys, with the Bundesliga back, I'm sure you're as busy as ever. But Chris, what have you got to possibly point people in the direction of?
Well, obviously, if you've got any interest in Timo Werner, Bayern Munich, Liverpool, or just what's going to happen next for him, you can find the article I wrote on fussballstat.com. And then from me, it's just going to be either on the whistle reports or thoughts in the aftermath from the weekend's games that are coming up.
Nicely done. Busy as always. And yes, I can only recommend that you check out that fantastic article from Chris on Timo Werner. Manuel, what have you got going on across the Football Grads Network?
Yeah, just the previews are going to be out. We're going to, of course, preview the Bayern and the Dortmund game, and then always a third. So yet to be decided. It's going to be a surprise, I guess. And feature articles, reactionary to transfers. There's a few transfer stories still developing across the league, and we're going to keep an eye on them. So that will be all tweeted out at Footballgrad Live. You can follow me at Manuel Veth. I write for a couple other outlets as well, including Forbes, on the Bundesliga. So you can find me at Manuel Veth.
I think we should probably say congratulations to Kevin Prince Boateng, once of Eintracht Frankfurt, now of FC Barcelona, which, as I said to you guys in a private chat, if I was a footballer, I would be kicking down his agent's door to get me on their books.
Has this been confirmed now, yeah?
It's confirmed.
I just can't believe it. I mean, fair play to him. And he's a player of some talent, but how has that happened?
He was pretty good at Frankfurt, and you do know what you're going to get from him. I was just surprised that he went to Barcelona.
Yeah, fair play to the agent, fair play to the player. But that more or less does it until next week. Hopefully you've all enjoyed the Bundesliga returning and the Gegenpressing Podcast returning properly. Guys, I suppose if you need any more football in the meantime, as Manu said, go over to @FootballGradLive on Twitter, but feel free to get in touch with any of us regarding topics you'd like to maybe hear discussed, especially those on Osberg. Trying to squeeze that in. Anyway, I've been your host, Bryce Dunn. You can find me on Twitter at BryceDunn11. Until next week, auf Wiedersehen.
Ich warte seit Wochen auf diesen Tag und tanz vor Freude über den Asphalt, als wär's ein Rhythmus, als gäb's ein Lied, das mich immer weiter durch die Straßen zieht. Komm dir entgegen, dich abzuholen.
We can get anything delivered from furniture to toilet paper. And now, adult beverages with Drizzly. Drizzly lets you compare prices from local liquor stores on a huge selection of beer, wine, and spirits, then get them delivered right to your door in under 60 minutes. And right now, Drizzly's giving all new customers $5 off their first order. Just enter promo code EASY5 at checkout. Download the Drizzly app or go to drizzly.com. That's DRIZLY.com.
Thank you for listening to Believe. You can show support to your host by subscribing to the show and giving us a 5-star rating on your preferred platform. Check us out at Believe.com and search for BLEAV on YouTube.